Monday Night Wars podcast.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Monday Night Wars podcast. I am your host, Joseph Rojas. No, I'm not joined by Scott today. If you remember, if you listen to our Patreon, $2 a month, Scott is quite sick right now. So he won't be on, he wasn't on that episode and he won't be on this episode, but he will be back the following week. Unfortunately, short timing, couldn't get a second host to help us today. So it's just going to be me flying solo. So I hope you can bear with me for the next, we'll see, about an hour, listening to just me ramble. Not like that's any different from the usual episode, but you don't have Scott being hilarious the entire time, unless you count this, because I was so depressed doing the Scott-less episode on the Patreon that I brought Scott with me. Say hi, Scott. Hi, Scott. That's good, man. So you're going to see Scott a lot today, actually. He's going to actually give me points and agree with me and talk about how great I am the entire time. So we start off in WCW Nitro. I don't know where it's at because this guy didn't look it up for me. So it's starting off with Conan versus Dean Malenko. In case we forgot to mention, which I know I did, it is March 24th, 1997. And Conan versus Dean Malenko to start us off for Nitro. Six has a picture-in-picture where he says Malenko got spanked at Super Brawl, and he should have at Uncensored, but Eddie Guerrero just screwed things up so bad. He then really stumbles all over himself, and they used this. Like, this was clearly pre-recorded, so just take it again. I don't understand why they wouldn't do that. For some reason, they didn't, and this is the version that they stuck with. Makes no sense to me. Tony Schiavone and Zbyszko then have to cover up all the flubs and say, is Eddie with the NWO? That's the point that Six was trying to make, is that, you know, Eddie may have joined us, but they don't ever make that work. And so it's really confusing, and we don't know what Six is trying to say. So unfortunately, it is what it is. The match itself is good, though, and the strongest we have seen from Conan by far thus far. Uncoincidentally, it's against Dean Malenko, who's just superb in the ring. He's fantastic. Malenko ultimately locks in the cloverleaf and he gets the win. Gene interviews Dean and asks about Six and Eddie. Dean says, obviously, Eddie is with Six, again, leading to the conspiracy that maybe he's joining the NWO. He says he will get to the bottom of this, but for now, he'll focus on Benoit, who is the spitting image of himself, according to Dean. Now, both of these individuals have stories of being locker room bullies. So it is possible. I'm not saying they were, to be clear. I'm just saying those stories exist. You can find them. Malenko looks forward to their match as we head to commercial. Another strong promo from Dean Malenko. Short, to the point. It's exactly what we want to see from him. So it gets a B. What do you think, Scott? I think it gets a B. Yeah, he agrees with me. Anyways, next up we have Mortis versus Jerry Flynn. Why is this match so long? I don't have the times because Scott forgot to grab them, but it takes forever, and Mortis wins with an Avalanche Samoa drop. I'm going to give that a D. It really, look, we know Mortis is Canyon. I love Canyon, but this is not, this just doesn't work. Anyways, we move on to something that my boy Scott has to be real happy about because it's La Parka versus Juventud Guerrera. I love La Parka. Scott loves La Parka. La Parka is in the finest gear that I have ever seen him in. It's a complete La Parka Traje de Charro. If you don't know what that is, it's a mariachi outfit. That's what it is. He also has like a gold La Parka title belt around his waist. This is what a creative character looks like at its finest. It's fantastic. The match itself is a hell of a lot of fun, and we finally get to see La Parka be a guy, like really be somebody in WCW. He counters an Avalanche Rana into an Avalanche Powerbomb, hits a twisting senton. It's essentially Jeff Hardy's Whisper in the Wind. He wins off of this move, and I found myself enjoying the hell out of this match and gave it a B plus. What do you think, Scott? Oh, I thought it was great. I think I agree with your assessment. Scott always that's beautiful, man. That's beautiful. Anyways, we move on to Mean Gene interviewing the Steiners. Gene asks them about their upcoming tag title match at Spring Stampede. Scott Steiner says what you saw in the recap on the screen may be history now, but it is ever so present in our minds. A great, great line from Scott. Not you, Scott. Scott Steiner, Scott. He says it will be the Steiners' revenge at Spring Stampede, and then Rick says that he's ready. This is a simple interview, and thankfully it doesn't meander. It's quite good. I'm giving it a B. So far, we've had a pretty strong start from WCW Nitro. We then move on into High Voltage versus Public Enemy. Joseph, did somebody get thrown through a table? Yes, somebody got thrown through a table. High Voltage A gets put through a table by Rocco Rock, but Jeff Jarrett runs in to hit Johnny Grunge with the Halliburton, and High Voltage B gets the win. Mongo comes out because he's pissed that Deborah and Jeff Jarrett are getting too close. He thinks that they're, cheating on him. This is the second cheating storyline angle that we've had in Nitro. Gets a D. It's not good. Mean Gene then interviews Lex Luger and Giant. Gene says that in 2 weeks, a 4 corners match, win by pinfall or submission, Lex Luger and the Giant are going to face Harlem Heat in individual competition, but the winner will face Hulk Hogan of the NWO in the future. Now, if you're confused by what any of that means, good. So am I. I watched this 3 times in a row and still have no clue what he said. That is exactly how he said it. Giant starts many promos in this era by saying, first of all, and he never really gets to second of all. He just stays at first of all. Giant says he's the one facing Lex. Wait, what? That's not what Gene just said. Then he says that Harlem Heat will have no idea what's coming. What? Who is wrestling who and for what? Gene says to Lex that it's Hogan's MO to divide and conquer. What is going on? Lex says he can feel the balance of power shifting. They have the biggest trump card in wrestling now, and it goes by the name of Sting. Then he tells Hogan it will be the rack or the choke slam. Make your choice. What? This ends, and Shivani has to clear up this whole thing. So what I think is supposed to be what they're trying to get over is that at some point, Giant and Luger are facing Harlem Heat. But at Spring Stampede, they're facing each other for the right to face Hogan at a later date. I think that's what they're saying. We'll find out over the next few weeks what they actually meant. Given this D, it's not very good. Do you like it, Scott? Scott did not like it. Next, we get Super Callow versus Psychosis. This match is sloppy as hell, and mostly it's Super Callow. Psychosis does look pretty good, though, and he wins with a giant diving leg drop. I gave it a C because Psychosis is quite good. Super Callow's not. Not saying Super Callow isn't good normally. He's just not quite good in this match. So I'm giving it a C, being a bit of an optimist, because so far, for the most part, I've enjoyed Nitro. Next, we get Hugh Morris versus Chris Benoit. Conan interferes and throws Benoit off the top rope, and Hugh Morris hits his moonsault for the win. Then Kevin Sullivan runs in and he attacks Benoit again. Malenko tries to help him, but they beat up Malenko as well. Seemingly, Malenko doesn't want Benoit to not be at full strength when they wrestle each other. In Malenko's promo, he said that he respects Benoit a lot, so that kind of makes sense based off what we saw earlier in the night. Flair comes down to even the odds. Seemingly, he's healthy now, or at least healthy enough to be physical. He also plays mediary between Benoit and Malenko because Benoit did not see Malenko try to help him. And so he's not really sure what he's doing there. And he wants to and Flair tries to make sure that Benoit doesn't swing at Malenko because Flair did know that Malenko tried to help him. So this may kind of be the start of Malenko potentially joining the Horsemen. We'll see. I have no idea. But also, for the love of God, please make it end between Sullivan and Benoit. It is so, so annoying. The match itself is fine. I'll say I like the Malenko stuff, so I'm going to give it a C. It's not horrible. It's not the worst we've seen from Sullivan lately, but it is not great. Next, we have Faces of Fear. You like Faces of Fear, don't you, Scott? He does. Versus Harlem Heat, who me and Scott both like. I actually like Faces of Fear too, to be clear. The fans chant, they chant "Let's go," and what sounds like Goldberg. So it sounds like they're chanting "Let's go Goldberg," but this would be about 6 months too early. So either whatever they're actually chanting got edited out and somebody piped in "Let's go Goldberg," or it's something like similar, but I couldn't figure out what it was. I might be missing something. We get a hard-hitting match as we have 4 meaty men slapping meat. Later, the fans chant Harlem Heat, so maybe they were chanting "Let's go Booker" earlier, but it didn't sound like Booker, so I really don't know what it was. The match ends when Meng tries to clothesline Booker in the corner. Sister Sherry pushes Booker out of the way and takes the hit. A stunned Meng gets hit with a Harlem sidekick, and Booker picks up the 1, 2, 3. Really, really fun match. Really pretty decent TV match that we get from the two tag teams. Giving this a B. Enjoyed it. Gene then interviews the Horseman. Gene asks Benoit his thoughts on Sullivan. Benoit says that Sullivan has a yellow streak down his back. Then Benoit targets Malenko, who tried to help him earlier. What? Okay. Then Gene asks Flair about Piper. Flair says the hot rod couldn't hang with the Horsemen. He says Roddy owes it to the youngsters to show them why they are the legacy. Then he says he wants Hot Rod to say he is a horseman. What? Where is any of this going? And then we just kind of peter out, and it gets a D. It's really not good. And dear God, what is going on with the Horsemen in 1997? Next, we get what the hell? It's a women's match. It's Malia Hosaka versus Medusa. Medusa gets her match of the year, not saying it's her best match, just that WCW stole her only to never have her wrestle. So this is her one match of the year. If you listen to or watch our show now, you know that I love Medusa, and it's just sad seeing how this career fades out. It unfortunately will get much worse, and before she finally just calls it a career and goes into a monster truck career, which is pretty fucking cool. Anyways, match is quick and good for what it is. Medusa wins with the German suplex with the bridge pin, and it gets a B minus. Next, we get Scott. You know what's coming up, right? Yeah, it's On the Road with Lee Marshall, 1-800 Collect Road Report. That's fucking beautiful, man. I love that. Lee Marshall is here, and he's in Roanoke, Virginia. He says the only thing louder than Heenan's clothes are the fans here who certainly know how to throw a Nitro party. He says they will soon be in Los Angeles, and he checked with his pals in Pasadena, and there is no Tournament of Weasels parade. Fantastic work from Lee Marshall, and Lee Marshall always gets an A+ from me and from Scott here. Renegade versus Hacksaw is our next. You know what? I'm just going to turn this. Scott shouldn't hear me say negative things about Hacksaw. It's Renegade versus Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Look, Hacksaw wasn't going to lose this match. Renegade's a jobber. Hacksaw wraps his fist up with tape, and then he fists Renegade for the victory. I'm giving it like a C minus. Okay. Up next, we have the Amazing French Canadians versus the Steiners. This is a simple tag team match to showcase that Rick Steiner is, in fact, no longer hurt. The crowd loves every moment of it, as Scott even wallops on Colonel Robert Parker. The former Quebecers hit the elevated senton bomb, and they called it something else. I just don't remember what it is. And should have had a 3 count, but Scott Steiner has referee Randy Anderson distracted. He came in with the Montreal flag, or Quebec flag rather, and he came in and he was going to hit one of them with it, and the ref's distracted by this, so he doesn't get the 3 count because the ref has no idea what's going on. Rick Steiner then dodges as Rougeau hits Ouellette with the over the head rather with Colonel Parker's boot. and Rick picks up the win. It's really good for what it is. I'm giving it a B minus. It's not perfect. It's not amazing. But the purpose of it is to make sure people know that Rick Steiner is healthy. And that's really what it's for, which is a good storytelling technique. I think the Amazing French Canadians are a good team to do that with. They're heels, but on top of that, they are entertaining in the ring heels. So you don't need to have a story to wrap around with them. You can just get a simple in-ring story told and make it work for what is building for 2 weeks from now. Next, and our main event, I know I've rushed through to our main event, mostly because I just miss. I mean, look, I love this Scott, but I prefer real Scott. I will explain why it's Child Scott, by the way, in a bit. I'll do it between the episode or between Raw and Nitro. So we get the main event, and it's Macho Man Randy Savage versus Prince Iakea for the WCW Television Championship. Now, if you remember, because they won whatever the fuck it was at Uncensored, whatever that match was, NWO has the right to challenge for any title at any time. So Mach, I guess, has chosen this time to challenge for the TV championship. Okay. Almost all of the NWO is out here with Mach, minus Hogan and Hall. Not really sure why Hall, but Hogan makes sense. He was obviously doing a lot of things at the time. Prince Iake is in no way a bad wrestler, but Mach makes him look superb in this. And the match ends up being a ton of fun. Mach has a clear win, though, when he hits the diving elbow. Instead of finishing the pinfall, he decides to taunt the Prince and lifts his head and shoulders just before the 3 count. DDP runs down from the crowd and clobbers, absolutely levels Vincent and then Nick Patrick. When Nash and Six try and stop him, DDP makes it into the ring and attacks Mach, but unfortunately the numbers game gets too much to him. The match is thrown out, obviously. DDP gets power bombed as the crowd, jackknifed rather, as the crowd chants, "We want Sting, we want Sting." Mach hits the diving elbow, and then Nash jackknifes Prince Iakea. They spray paint NWO on the Prince and DDP as the show closes. Now, DDP really should not be winning just yet. As frustrating as the NWO has kind of become, he absolutely should not go over here. We need him to have the hero's journey. Frankly, charging a bunch of guys by yourself is dumb. It's really not very intelligent. And that's the point. He isn't being smart here. He's just being aggressive. He's being passionate. He's really not thinking. So story-wise, we should not be rewarding him yet. Makes perfect sense why he got his ass beat. But this is building to something. So for right now, we're going to enjoy it. I'm giving this an A, even though we've seen NWO reign supreme to close out just about every show. This makes sense because DDP is going to do something fantastic, but you have to build towards it. So it's a fantastic show for the most part. I gave it a B minus. It's mostly good. There's some bad things, Horsemen, for some reason, have been awful. Dungeon of Doom, pretty much anything they touch is awful. Unfortunately, that's just a reality. But that is finished, but we are not finished. Are we, Scott? No, we're not finished, Joseph. So the reason that Scott is a little kid here is Scott made the mistake one time of posting on Facebook his ID of him as a kid at his elementary school. And so I took that photo and for a long time, and I mean years, turned him into a meme where whatever he would talk about on Facebook, I would insert him in whatever that was. So this is one of my favorite ones where he is actually inserted into this cowboy hat right here is Ronald Reagan. It's a very famous Ronald Reagan photo. That's Ronald Reagan's cowboy hat tilted exactly the way that it is in that photo with probably 8-year-old Scott here in it, which is fantastic. So we move on to Raw, and we start off with the Headbangers versus Bulldog and Owen Hart. Now, the Headbangers, you may remember, if you listen to our Patreon, $2 a month for the WrestleMania 13 episode, they earned the right to have a tag team title match tonight. The Road Warriors get a picture-in-picture during this, and Animal says they don't care who the champs are between the Headbangers and Bulldog and Owen. when they face them, they will get the belts because they are the greatest tag team of all time. Arguably, that is correct. Then Hawk says, well, we're looking to rip out some medulla oblongata. He then perfectly describes that this is the brain stem and that if they rip it out of their opponents, they will lose all motor skills and will be finished. Professor Road Warrior Hawking is correct here. This match is fine, but Bulldog and Owen get into it as they have for weeks now. The two actually start throwing fists and refs have to separate them. Meanwhile, the headbangers just leave, which is strange. Owen grabs a mic and says he's sick and tired of Bulldog's crap and he's sick of carrying the team. He says if Bulldog is any kind of a man, he'll give him a shot at the European belt. Bulldog doesn't care how many Slammies Owen has won. You watch yourself when you talk about Owen Slammies. He will beat him fair and square. He says he will give him the match, but when he wins, it's the last match that Owen is going to get for the European Championship. Overall, I gave this C. I thought the promos were pretty strong, but everything else kind of, okay, whatever. It's fine. It's not bad by any stretch, but it's just kind of, okay. Mankind has a promo backstage where he says he's gone and he left him. He finally lets us know that the he that he is referring to is Paul Bearer, who's left him. He calls him Uncle Paul and he pleads for him to come back. It's not an amazing segment, but it is a necessary one. Mankind really has no business being with Paul Bearer, in my opinion. And honestly, just ripping the Band-Aid off is fine. Sometimes you just got to do it. I gave it a C. It's not amazing. It's fine. Mankind will do much better things very soon, actually. So we're in store for some great stuff. We move on to the next segment, which is Bart Gunn versus Hunter Hearst Helmsley. Bret is actually on the Titantron. Bret Hart, rather, is on the Titantron. And he says he wants a chance to get stuff off his chest. Goldust gets a picture-in-picture and says there are no more words, only actions. He says after next week, there will be no more sequels when he faces Trips 1 versus 1 with no managers at ringside. With the ref distracted, China power slams Bart Gunn and Vin Man says you can't hit a woman, but apparently you can shit on one, allegedly. Hunter hits the pedigree for the win. It's fine. It's actually mildly entertaining, C+. I really, China power slamming Bart Gunn was fantastic. Bret at the top of it really wants to be able to get stuff off his chest. This is going to continue throughout the night. He wants basically, screen time is what he's asking for. Then we have the next segment, which I can best describe as Mexicans versus Mexicans. That's essentially what this is. It's two sets of three luchadors that I didn't bother writing their name because I didn't realize I was going to be doing this solo at the time. And normally Scott has that. I didn't bother writing their names because, unfortunately, though they're all fine in the ring, there's nothing wrong with them. We have zero reason to care. Vince is trying to play on what has done so well for WCW. He's trying to make the luchadors a thing, but he's not taking the time that they've taken to make it a thing, which is give the same ones over and over screen time so we really get to know them. And in the case of someone like Rey Mysterio, we not only have gotten to know him, he's actually built a character over there. It's not a crazy impressive character, but it is a character. And so we get to know these things as well as not just luchadors, but other cruiserweights along the way. So it's hard to kind of get behind this. One of the teams wins. There's really no reason to care. This is going to get a D. It's not great. Moving on, we go to another not great segment, which is Flash Funk versus Brooklyn Brawler. What the hell are we doing here? Flash Funk hits the 450 splash for the win, which I recently discovered was invented by Scott Steiner. It was on Chris Van Vliet's podcast. Did not know that. It gets a D from me, but that is impressive that Scott Steiner invented that. We move on and Vin Man interviews Ken Shamrock. He asked Ken why he didn't stop the match last night. Shamrock says clearly Austin was unresponsive, so for his safety, he had to call it. This is fine, but it goes on way too long, so I'm going to give it a C. We move on and Bret Hart finally gets his opportunity. He has been wanting to speak all night. He has a few times interrupted matches to say when is he getting his time, and he finally has it. So like the last bit where it went on too long, We have another thing that goes on too long. It will get better, to be clear, but Bret is long-winded, and so that's where we're at. Hart apologizes to his fans all over the world. He outlines all the countries and continents, but says to his fans in the USA, he apologizes for nothing. He says the fans treated him like trash no matter what he does. When he beat Austin, they cheer him like he won, and they boo Bret Hart. He rightly brings up the hypocrisy of WWF fans to cheer Austin when he repeatedly attacked Hart, but boo Hart when he returned the favor. It's a good idea, kind of a weird way of getting there, but it's fine. He then calls Shawn Michaels gay. It's 1997. That's just going to happen. He then goes on for a long while. He calls Shawn's injury fake. He talks about how he won the title back, but he never ran and hid. Hart's central point is that American fans support criminals and the rest of the world respects heroes like him. The strategy is actually really great, but Bret is not the guy to deliver it. He says that American fans can kiss his ass. HBK finally comes out and he says, let's get one thing perfectly straight. He says you can say whatever you want about himself. He also says you don't need to tell us that you wouldn't give up the belt. No one knows better than Shawn that it takes a handwritten note from the Lord Almighty to get the belt from Bret. But what Bret doesn't understand is that just because HBK lives his life openly and freely instead of putting up a facade like Bret, it does not make Bret a better man. Shawn's shooting here. Bret Hart is 100% a facade. Shawn makes sure Bret knows that Austin didn't give up and that even Bret has to admit that Austin is one tough son of a bitch. Then Shawn turns a gear and he just starts working himself up. Like nothing has been said, but he just starts working himself up. He says that he's in no condition to wrestle. Then offhandedly goes, "I know you're tougher than me, blah, 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 blah. That's fine. I don't have to be number one, Bret. I don't obsess like you do. I do this because I like it. You do this because in your mind, Mark man, you really think all of this is yours. Now, what you need to understand is that every time they reach into their pocket to pay you to watch you, or sorry, reach in their pocket to pay to watch you, me, or anybody else, they have the right to cheer or boo anybody they want." He tells Bret, "See how they're cheering me? They booed me before, and I didn't get bent out of shape about it. You know why? Because in this country, we have something that's called the First Amendment, which allows us to live our lives how we see fit as long as it is not causing harm to anyone." Shawn in 1997 nails what the First Amendment actually is. Most people use it wildly incorrectly nowadays. Shawn also says, "I'm in no shape to go, but if you want to go, what the hell, let's go now." He then says, "America, love it or leave it," also a phrase used incorrectly these days. Bret then tells Shawn to get out of his face. Shawn says he isn't really good with authority. Shawn brings back Bret's claims about Shawn and Playgirl and asks Bret how did he know he was in it. Bret couldn't help but flip through it. Also a gay joke, but significantly less grotesque than one Jerry might deliver. To be fair with Bret, his wasn't as bad as something that Jerry would deliver either. Hart then attacks Shawn at this point and puts his leg in the turnbuckle figure four. Psycho Sid runs in and chases Bret off. I like this segment and I'm giving it an A, but this segment is a perfect microcosm of a counter to a claim I've heard for years. Everyone says Bret Hart's heel run in 1997 is great, and I disagree. It's simply okay. It's everyone around Bret who brings it to life. Shawn Michaels and Steve Austin breathe life into Bret Hart's heel run. Bret Hart is simply there. His promos usually have good ideas, but are far too time consuming and meandering. It's Austin and Shawn who drive home the points. We see that in this segment. Bret plods along and plods along. He brings up excellent points, but paces so slowly to make them. Then Shawn walks in and the segment heats up. Bret is best when he is short and sweet. He simply doesn't have the charisma on mic. The best thing he does is when he attacks Shawn here, because that is what he's good at, is the stuff that is physical that's in the ring. That makes Bret Hart the hitman. He obviously can't say nothing. I'm not saying he should never talk, but he can be more succinct. and allow his peers to drive the story and just say very simple things when needed. Um, Me and Scott right now, technically not this Scott, real Scott, are in like mid-September in our private watch, which means Bret Hart will be in this company for another 2 months max at the point of where we're currently watching. At no point from now till September will Bret himself get better. He is exactly this for the next 6 months, which means he has to do something astronomical in the last 2 months of his WWF career for me to believe that 1997 heel Bret Hart is great. Again, I'm talking about the character, not the in ring performer. But he is simply not the total package when it comes to the entire scope of wrestling. Whether you like it or not, mic and character work are part of that. So again, I gave this segment an A, but we're going to keep seeing this from Bret Hart over the next few, really till the end of his run in WWF. Up next, we have Rocky Maivia versus Leif Cassidy. Bret comes back down and joins commentary, says he hasn't snapped, he's just opened his eyes. Again, this is where it works. See, Bret Hart works really well when he says very quick and succinct things. Also, on top of that, Bret Hart, we've said a number of times, on commentary was always really good. I don't know why. I'm not saying he should have been a commentator. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying for some reason on commentary, he was always very strong. Rocky wins pretty easily. And then Bret Hart attacks Rocky to show us what wickedly bad looks like. Before that, he had said something about, if you want to see wickedly bad, I'll show you wickedly bad. And now this is his example. It's pretty good. I'll give it a C. The match itself is whatever, but I do actually really like what Bret Hart brought to it. Again, very physical, short and succinct. That's the Bret Hart that makes a lot of sense. Ahmed Johnson versus Savio Vega is our next match, and Savio gets Ahmed's shoulders hurt, but Ahmed perseveres. Perseveres? Yeah, okay, perseveres and goes for the Pearl River plunge when Crush pulls Savio out of harm's way for the DQ. Ahmed says this has gone too far and he wants to make a deal with them. If he beats them, then they have to leave the WWF, meaning the entire nation. All right, it's fine. Giving it a C. It's not amazing. We finally end with an Undertaker interview. Paul Bearer wants to talk to Taker rather, and we head to commercial. We come back, and for some reason, they have decided they're going to make a standard interview between Vin Man and Undertaker, which makes no sense for this version of Undertaker. It's very weird. I don't know why they thought it would work. Taker says he'll beat anyone who tries to oppose him. He thanks Psycho Sid for his courage. What? Vin Man asks him if his reign will be like his last reign. Taker says he had a short reign last time because he lost his edge. And by lost his edge, he means he got Hulk Hogan. Paul Bearer comes out and says he wants Taker to listen to him for just a moment. Mankind is on the Titantron pleading for Uncle Paul as Paul Bearer says he did everything he did for Taker. Then JR says, we're running out of time, so long, everybody. What? That's how we end the show. It gets an F. They were clearly trying to do something here. I just don't really know what it was. Do you, Scott? No, Joseph, I have no idea what it was. Scott has no idea either. It's not good. I'm giving this a B-2 for a show. Overall, it's a fine show. A lot of ups and downs. Obviously, the best thing is the Shawn and Bret Hart stuff. Looking at the card, it's hard for me to say that this is technically better than Nitro. So I'm going to give it to Nitro this week for who won. Obviously, we know in the ratings Nitro won, but I have a hard time disagreeing with that. Although I will say, I think the Bret Hart and Shawn segment, especially Shawn, probably the more important of the two. But that's just my opinion. By more important of the two, I mean between the two shows, I think it was the most important segment of the night. The DDP segment was good, but it wasn't quite as important as this one. But on Nitro, I think they had a more consistently good program. So I'm going to give the edge to Nitro. Not so much better that it's like, damn, horrible WWF work. But unfortunately, it was consistently just good. And Raw had some really not good things. So we're giving it to Nitro. Now, this was a pretty short episode. I'm looking at it looks like we're going to be about 35, 36 minutes. It is what it is. I apologize to everybody for it, but Scott will be back next week, and we will make sure we have a good time. And I don't think he's going to watch this, so he probably has no idea about this. So I might surprise him with this live on the show next week, and we'll see what he does. He might get raging mad, and he might laugh his ass off. We have no idea. Let's find out. So for myself and for Scott, signing out of the Monday Night Wars podcast. See you next Monday, and don't forget to subscribe if you're on YouTube. We have gotten some new subscribers, so we appreciate that. And if you want to listen to any unedited episodes or any pay-per-views, and then as the Thursday Night Wars start to happen and the next year, we'll be adding those to our Patreon as well. Make sure you subscribe for $2 a month. Say bye, Scott. Bye, Scott. See you guys.